Have you heard about Jessica Foster? There she is. She's an influencer who's gained a ton of followers, posting pictures as an army service member with MAGA figures on her Instagram account, jessica.foster. I was curious to see the account myself, so I typed it on the search bar and found nothing. The account had disappeared. I checked the link tree, I found somewhere, and same, nothing. Now the big question is, who's Jessica? Or more specifically, who's behind Jessica's account? Because yeah, Jessica Foster does not exist. She was almost certainly generated by artificial intelligence. There is no trace of her in civil records, public documents, or military service. She is fake. But she's also emblematic of what I identify as the third step in gendered military propaganda, a new strategy gaining popularity around the world that increasingly relies on AI, irony, and eroticism. But before we get to that, we first need to describe the steps that came beforehand. One of them is what I call the girl bossification of the military in the 2010s, a neoliberal distortion of the first step, which is the feminist push for women's inclusion in all sectors of public life, including the military. Each step feeds into the next, producing the conditions in which AI-generated military dream girls can become the blueprint for a new era of gendered war propaganda. My name's Alice, welcome back to my channel. Okay, let's start with step 1, damsels in distress. And before I do that, I need to share with you some really exciting news. If you clicked on this video, you're gonna love my new series, Ladylike. We just finished filming the 3rd episode on... You thought I was gonna spoil that. Absolutely not. However, the first episode is already out and the second one will be out very soon. Ladylike explores the lives and crimes of women who didn't really care about morals or gender roles. The idea came as a reaction to a decade of Me Too trials followed by an anti-feminist backlash. I felt like we deserve narratives that aren't that depressing, and so I came up with Ladylike. They say women cannot be dangerous, that violence isn't ladylike. Let me tell you about the women who decided otherwise. The women we talk about in this series have done absolutely crazy stuff. One was put on the most wanted terrorist list, another one ran a poisoning business, and another one ruled over 80,000 men as a pirate queen. But their stories are barely known. Now, if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, and let me tell you, if you like this video, you're gonna love it. The series is available right now on Nebula, the premium streaming platform made by creators for creators. On Nebula, you'll find familiar names like Philosophy Tube, FD Signifier, Brie Deschanel, and many more of your favorites. It's packed with original, ad-free content you won't find anywhere else. And it gives creators the freedom to really explore their ideas without having to worry about the algorithm, about censorship or demonetization. You can already find all my videos all in new ad-free on Nebula. The subscription is super affordable, and with my link you get 3 days for free and 50% off an annual subscription. That brings it down to just $30 a year or $2.5 a month. You can sign up at go.nebula.tv/AliceCapelle. Again, that's go.nebula.tv/AliceCapelle, or you can just scan the QR code that is on screen right now. Okay, back to the video now. Damsels in distress. Now, I started this video with AI creation Jessica Foster, and for this chapter, I'd like to talk to you about another Jessica. Her name is Jessica Lynch. Like Foster, she is blonde, blue-eyed, young, and worked in the military. Lynch joined the military in 2001, 50 years after women's proper inclusion in the army. In 2003, she was sent to Iraq to support the US invasion. Until then, she was just a young woman who could not pay for university and turned instead to the military, like many working-class young adults. But on April 1st, 2003, her life was turned upside down. A week beforehand, Lynch's convoy was on its way to Baghdad, but their vehicle experienced mechanical problems that delayed the company, made them miss a turn, and led them into territory controlled by Iraqi forces. Unsurprisingly, the group was ambushed, and Lynch was wounded and captured by Iraqis, while other members were killed. She was later sent to an Iraqi civilian hospital, and from that moment, the story of what happened changes depending on who you ask. Initial reports indicated that an Iraqi man whose wife worked as a nurse in the hospital told US forces that Lynch had been tortured but was alive. That version of events was later contradicted by Lynch herself, who said she was treated humanly with a nurse even singing to her. On March 30, Iraqi forces even tried to send Lynch back to US forces but had to abandon the mission when Americans fired on the Iraqi ambulance carrying her. None of that mattered though. At that stage, US forces understood the potential of Lynch's story. You know, the young, blonde, blue-eyed, working-class American taken hostage and mistreated by Iraqi forces. What a good story, right? On April 1st, 2003, the US deployed a surprisingly high number of soldiers from various forces, including Marines, Special Forces, pararescuemen, Rangers, and the Special Operation Aviation Regiment to retrieve Lynch and 8 other American soldiers staying in the hospital. The next day, the Pentagon released a 5-minute video of the rescue and explained that Lynch had been tortured, which again goes against her own account of what happened. Later in her authorized biography, Lynch strongly opposed the mention of a rape that supposedly occurred while she was in captivity, but she herself said she did not remember. Her biographer insisted, saying that, quote, "People need to know what can happen to female soldiers in war." Now, I'm sorry, I have to pause here because, yes, SA is commonly used in war to assert power over another group, but forcing a woman into embodying this traumatic experience for sensationalism and manufactured outrage to warn people of what happens to female soldiers, this is just disgusting. Anyway, you get the idea. The 5-minute video of her rescue was shared with the public and the authorized biography was released the same year. Jessica Lynch became a tool of gendered war propaganda. She was this brave American soldier who turned into a damsel in distress as soon as her company was ambushed and taken by Iraqis. She returned home as an icon, showered with gifts, flowers, and letters. She was awarded a bunch of medals and shown everywhere on TV as a woman in the military. In terms of female representation, you could think that is good. But what type of representation are we dealing with here? Are we celebrating Lynch because of her bravery or because of her story as a rescued captive? Are we celebrating the woman soldier or the rescued damsel in distress? The victory of good over evil, embodied by this young woman who was violated yet made it back home. You see, Jessica Lynch was immensely celebrated for what she represented, not really for what she did. I mean, she and her team and their female driver took the wrong turn. Women, they're driving, right? Speaking of the female driver, her name was Lori Piastiwa. She was Jessica's best friend and roommate, and she died of her wounds at the hospital. She also received recognition, but it was not comparable to the communication campaign Jessica was embedded in. It was Jessica herself who had to remind people that the true heroine of the ambush was Lori. But Lori did not fit the role as much as Jessica did in the eyes of the American government and the American people. Lori was driving. Jessica was a passenger. Lori was brown. Jessica is white. Lori died, and Jessica was, against her own account, framed as having been raped. Jessica's story feels much more important because it confirms the implication that women do not really belong in the military. I mean, for most of history, except in rare cases like the Egyptian queen, Hiotep I or Joan of Arc, war was the field of men who could fight, kill, and die, while women and children stayed safe at home. But it would be wrong to say that women were not involved at all. It depends what you mean by war. In fact, women have been involved in war in a variety of ways, including the role of camp follower. As you can see on this illustration, the woman is holding a basket full of drinks and food to be served to the soldier and their superiors. She is relegated to the nevertheless important role of camp follower. She shows up when men are resting to take care of them, feed them, and nurse them in exchange for a small salary. Some of these women became camp followers to pay the bills, others were excited about the patriotic role they were playing, and others were simply helping the men in their families who had been conscripted. As early as 1792, French revolutionary Théroigne de Méricourt demanded the right for women to bear arms. She also called for women-only battalions, urging women to arm themselves, train, and form a corps of, quote, Amazons. Her proposal was not welcomed warmly, as you can imagine. A year later, actually, France signed a decree meant to remove useless women from the military. So only cooks, nurses, and seamstresses were allowed to stay. Things would not change much until the First World War. More and more women were already working outside the home, and their skills became useful for increasing the manufacturing capacity of European countries entering the war. Other women joined soldiers directly on the battlefield as experienced nurses and translators. Some even managed to pass as men, like Milonka Savic, who received significant recognition. Meanwhile, in Russia, the new government of 1917 created special female battalions, including the one led by Maria Botchareva. In 1917, Maria Botchareva created the first Russian women's battalion of death. I mean, look at them. You don't want to mess with them, I'm telling you. The battalion quickly attracted more than 2,000 volunteers in Petrograd. In the West, recognition of women's efforts during the war facilitated their access to the right to vote, which opened the path to their later inclusion in the army. That did not happen for a while though. Women were still forbidden to touch firearms. The USSR though chose a different strategy and deployed 800,000 women during the Second World War. Things really started changing in the West in the 1970s. Feminism was gaining momentum and helped shift societal norms around what it means to be a woman. Feminists fought for better representation in society and politics. This eventually trickled down to the military. So from the 1970s onward, Western militaries gradually opened more roles to women, beginning with the United States allowing women in the military academies in 1975. Similar reforms spread across NATO through the 1980s. A major turning point came in 1989 when Canada ruled that excluding women from combat was discriminatory, triggering successful legal challenges in other countries. By the early 1990s, women in the US, Europe, and Israel were serving on surface warships and flying fighter jets for the first time. Over the following decades, most major Western armies lifted remaining restrictions on women in combat, including infantry roles, and today a number of states allow women to serve on the front line. Here is a map I found that represents that data. In orange, the countries that allow women to take part in the military, and those in grey do not or do not share that data. Now, while those last barriers to women's inclusion in the military were being removed, something else happened. In 1995, Hillary Clinton declared this.
Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights once and for all.
If you've been following my channel for a while, it is not the first time you've seen this clip, and the reason why I keep showing it to you is because this argument, which sounds like such a memorable advance in the fight for women's rights, also became an argument for something much darker. It became an argument for war. More and more war. In 2001, almost a month after 9/11, the US invaded Afghanistan.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against Al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan.
And 2 years later, they did the same thing in Iraq.
To all the men and women of the United States Armed Forces now in the Middle East, the peace of a troubled world and the hopes of an oppressed people now depend on you.
In both cases, the defense of human rights, and more specifically women's rights, were used as arguments to legitimize aggression. In the case of Iraq, it was not as obvious, as many of the formal rights Iraqi women had acquired were weakened, but mostly still in place. So we could say that the Jessica Lynch situation, especially the need to rescue her from dangerous Iraqis, served as a replacement for that. In the case of Afghanistan, the Taliban's oppression of women was much more visible. Former First Lady Laura Bush expressed her concerns for Afghan women under the Taliban regime early on in the conflict. But it is important to remember that the US provided weapons and training to groups during the Soviet-Afghan War, some of which later formed the Talibans in the 1990s. You see, the moral obligation of saving women has the effect of cancelling the complex reality of the past. French feminist Christine Delphy pointed out that claims about, quote, liberating women only appeared after the war had begun and mostly served political and military goals. Delphy writes from a materialist feminist perspective, which in simple terms means that she looks at how women's oppression is tied to economic and power structures, not just traditions or laws. From this view, the war did not really improve women's autonomy or address the deeper causes of gender inequality, and in some cases, even increased instability and violence. Delphy's point is that women's rights were instrumentalized as a tool to legitimize war, rather than generally guiding policy, showing a kind of divide and conquer logic in which feminist language is co-opted to support imperial aims. Her book was published in English in 2008, and to be fair, it's still relevant today. Something has changed in the meantime though. The 2010s saw the rise of girl boss feminism, which turned increased female representation into something we should all celebrate regardless of the actions of that person. During that time, feminism became synonymous with women in powerful position, and that is why in my country, 49% of people believe that Marine Le Pen, the woman behind the French far-right party, the National Rally, is feminist, despite the fact that her party has historically opposed women's rights. War, too, has been girl-bossified. The high number of women in the IDF is described as a form of empowerment. The phrase feminist diplomacy was used for the first time in 2012, and since then has been used by female politicians who have worked or are still working in governments facilitating the operations of a war criminal. It is all very absurd, and it makes a lot of feminists, myself included, very angry. Because how are we supposed to explain to people that feminist is important, that it matters, when politicians reduce it to a buzzword to manufacture consent for more and more interventions, more and more death of women, but also destruction of their homes, their universities, their schools, their hospitals and workplaces, so the places that support their emancipation. The lack of accountability that these serious, morally grounded leaders face is dragging us further and further into disbelief, allowing others to push the boundaries of what we understand as war propaganda. And there we are now, finally entering step 3, female warfluencers in a post-truth world. I found myself wondering, is this real? Way more often in the last couple of years. We asked ourselves this question recently in the video on Dubai influencers and the fact that a bunch of them posted similar videos praising Dubai's officials for protecting them. When asked if they were paid to do this, the influencers said no. Similarly, I recently stumbled upon a trend of AI videos of female Iranian soldiers all saying the same thing.
Habibi, come to Iran. Come to Iran. Habibi, come to Iran.
I love you. I love Iran.
And using pretty much the same background. I did not ask myself, is this real? Because clearly it was not. Women in Iran are not allowed in the military. But I did wonder who was behind this. And it's the same question for Jessica Foster, whose clone actually appeared on one of the Iran soldiers' videos. Actually, Jessica has to pick a side.
So much fun.
But yeah, the Washington Post journalist who investigated Jessica's account could not find who created it. This is confusing, right? One side of me wants to think that this is obviously state war propaganda, but another side of me simply sees a profitable trend anyone can jump onto, grow their account. I mean, the Jessica Foster account was ultimately tied to an OnlyFans account until it got deleted and recreated on FanView, where AI-generated characters are accepted. Within days of its creation, that new account actually received more than 10,000 likes. That makes it difficult for me to make the point that Jessica Foster is a tool of gendered war propaganda for the US government. You know, people will say that I take this way too seriously. She's just a tool to make money, and that's precisely what makes this form of gendered war propaganda so powerful. It escapes criticism because it constantly flirts with irony, with the possibility that it is not something to be taken seriously. Trump does the same thing. The videos of him spreading poo on protesters, the video of him in newly rebuilt Gaza, that's exactly the same thing. The irony makes anyone seeking to analyze or critique look ridiculous, but the message still gets across. It's not surprising to me that the government did not comment or take action against Jessica Foster's account, despite the many pictures with MAGA figures that some of the fans believed were real. MAGA people are fascinating, to be honest. They can tell you with certainty that Brigitte Macron is a man.
It is time for you to wake up. So we will start from the top here with a photo of Brigitte Macron. Real name, Jean-Michel Trogneux.
But cannot tell the difference between AI and real images. Anyway, the fact that the government did not say anything about this implied that they were ultimately fine with it. They still viewed Jessica as beneficial, as a version of women soldiers that worked for them. In fact, this is not the first time MAGA officials have recognized the power of outsourcing war propaganda. In January 2023, they wrote about the way e-girl influencers are trying to get young people into the military. In it, they present Hey Lujan, a young woman working in the US military who caught the attention of the Trump family. Hey Lujan, like Jessica, feels weirdly fake, but she's actually real. They wrote that she posts thirst traps inside choppers and pouty selfies with assault rifles, with hashtags like pew pew and military curves. She shares cutesy unboxing compilations and makeup tutorials, get ready with me videos, lip syncs. She jokes about war bunkers and plays with remote control tanks, which she overlays with sparkly filters and heart emojis. But the Dazed article goes further, explaining that these women are not just recruitment trends. Their content participates in a broader cultural shift where militarism is made to look fun, cute, harmless, and relatable. By using e-girls' aesthetics, sparkles, and playful edits, they turn heavy weaponry and military life into lifestyle content that blends with the rest of the sort of videos you can find on TikTok or Instagram. As dazed nerds, this kind of soft focus militarization works even without official sponsorship, because the imagery itself helps normalize the idea that the military is aspirational and relatable. Later, the article mentions another e-girl called Natalia Fadif, who does something similar in the context of the IDF, mixing tactical gear with modeling poses and funky edits. It is not surprising that these girls are now being replaced by AI-generated characters on accounts probably run by some guys seeking money. But even if profit is the main motivation, the outcome is the same. These accounts circulate a post-truth version of militarism that governments benefit from without having to intervene or produce the content themselves. They get to outsource their war propaganda in the form of AI slop and fake accounts that can keep their fan base engaged. Irony and outsourcing are the characteristics of this new era in war propaganda. It's the late-stage capitalism, post-truth, AI slop version of gendered military propaganda. We're in it right now. Luckily for us, most people are media literate enough to avoid those obvious traps like the Jessica Foster account or the Iranian female soldier videos. But what's more scary though is when the strategy gets flipped around, when governments and people in general accuse real content posted from protesters and witnesses of being AI as a way to downplay war crimes or any illegal actions against civilians or protesters. Look at this picture, for example. The story behind it is really interesting. The picture went viral because it was reminiscent of the Tiananmen Square picture, you remember, with the protesters standing in front of the tanks. That's the picture right there. Our picture though depicts an Iranian protester, and the Iranian government called it AI generated, and to be fair, it does look a little bit AI. What do you think? But let me tell you what happened here. Someone from a high-rise building took a video of the scene. Someone else online screenshotted the video at this exact moment for obvious reason. I mean, look at how powerful this scene looks. The problem was that the image quality was super bad. The video was zoomed in to the max, so the user put the image through an AI enhancer software, which gave it its AI finish. And there you have it, a real picture accused of being anti-regime AI propaganda. This is the era we're in right now, an era in which suspicion itself becomes a tool of political communication. I can reassure you by telling you that there are organizations that are helping news outlets to, don't fall into those traps. And there are other organizations that are pushing for legislation. But for now, I think we have to recognize that as news consumption and production has been completely democratized, we as individuals, as citizens, have a responsibility to remain skeptical of the information we receive, to check, to not send to other people without having fact check, to make sure the news are coming from valid sources, and to teach the people around us how to become more media literate. Anyway, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, to subscribe, to hype if you thought it was interesting, helpful, educational. That really helps. Yes, the battery died again. So here I am to say a big thank you to my patrons and a super big thank you to top tier patrons: Ahmed, Alex, Boris, Brandon, Sibev, Christopher A. Butler, Christopher France, Koriji, Donage, Fred, Hong Ching-Won, Ian, James, Jeffley, Jose, Manuel, Nofol, Nick, Patrick Button, Patrick Riley, Paul Louis Agenot, Perry, Ria, Shunak, Tab Matin, Tristan, and Ojwal. And thank you to the other ones who prefer to stay anonymous. That's it for me, that's it for today. I'll see you very soon. Salut! Came beforehand. Merde, I didn't realize this.